अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
टाइम नहीं लूँगी इंट्रोडक्शन में क्योंकि मुझे अंदाज़ा है कि उनको नेक्स्ट मीटिंग में जाना है। तो हमने चाहा था कि दूसरे स्टेक होल्डर्स की राय आपके सामने आ जाए, इसके बाद आपको बात करने की दावत दी जाए। तो अब हमारी दरख्वास्त होगी कि आप आकर बात करें।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency, the Ambassador from the European Union, the Country Director from ILO, the Parliamentary Secretary on Human Rights, the Administrator for the Pakistan Institute of Labour Education and Research, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I'll start my speech in English and then I will address it in Urdu. First of all, to the European Union, thank you ever so much for giving us the GSP Plus. You've seen the figures. GSP Plus has certainly helped us a great deal. The figures that you gave of our rise in our exports, obviously that rise in exports has created jobs and has helped our people to improve their livelihood. So there is no doubt about it. You're also absolutely right that we need to increase our value-added export rather than the low value-added. And I can give you an assurance that when I look at the figures for the last 6 months, our exports of value-added products are increasing at a much, much faster rate than simply cloth and yarn. So it's a good sign. You very rightly said, and I want to address the Pakistan community here, इन्होंने कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है हमें GSP प्लस देने का. उन्होंने कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है कि ये कंडीशन 27 कन्वेंशन दे दो हमें कि ये करना पड़ेगा. ये हमारे लिए है. Then we hopefully, because of the conditions and because of our own civil society and because of our own political process, we want to improve the lives of our people. It is in our interest. हमारे लिए ये फ़ायदा है कि हम लोगों ने चाइल्ड लेबर को ख़त्म करें, हम लोगों ने बॉन्डेड लेबर को ख़त्म करें, हम लोगों ने औरतों को राइट्स दें. ये हमारे लिए है. तो ये नहीं है कि ये तो कन्वेंशन डाल दिए इसलिए हम लोग कर रहे हैं. नहीं, हम लोग इसलिए कर रहे हैं क्योंकि हमें करना है. And I must say we've had several meetings with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister is insisting on this, that we must have far greater compliance of the EU 27 conventions and the ILO, because it is us, we ourselves have to do it. ये जो आप लोग लेबर के नुमाइंदे हैं ना, and civil society के लोग, ये हमारी सबकी जिम्मेवारी है कि आप लोग आपके एम्प्लॉय से बात करें and civil society आप लोगों ने इसके ऊपर रेस करो, because we want to improve our society. हमें पता है कि हमें इस वक्त economically कमज़ोर है, लेकिन कोई बात नहीं है. आस्ते 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 बेहतर हो जाएगा. सवाल ये है कि हम लोग आज बेहतर है कि 50 साल पहले. इसमें कोई शक ही नहीं है कि आज हम लोग बेहतर है. जितना बेहतर होना चाहिए वो है कि नहीं है? नहीं है. करेंगे, कोई सी बात नहीं है. और मुझे तो बहुत उम्मीद है. और हम लोग ने इनको यूरोपियन यूनियन के पास मैं खुद जनवरी में जा रहा हूँ डेलीगेशन के साथ कि इनको रिक्वेस्ट करने के लिए कि ये कन्वेंशन के ऊपर हम लोगों ने काम किए हैं. इसके ऊपर इन कन्वेंशन के ऊपर हमारे इतना काम नहीं हुआ, लेकिन करेंगे. ये लोग कहते हैं कि आपका डायरेक्शन सही होना चाहिए, और इंशाअल्लाह हमारा डायरेक्शन सही है. तो इन्होंने क्यों हमें GSP प्लस ना दे. लेकिन चंद हफ्ते पहले मैंने एक और सेमिनार पर गया था और वहाँ European Union with the German government is funding millions of euros, just so that means our workplace, जहाँ हम लोग काम करते हैं वो सेफ है, environment ठीक है, तो ये इनकी मेहरबानी है कि ये इनके टैक्स पेयर्स के मनी वो खर्च कर रहे हैं हमारे ऊपर, तो हम लोग बेहतर हो जाए, तो इनकी मेहरबानी है मैं समझता हूँ। और हमारे ऊपर फ़र्ज़ है कि इनके पैसे नाजायज़ ना हो। We must not waste their taxpayers' money because they are being very generous, they are being gracious कि ये लोग यहाँ आते हैं और हमें बताते हैं कि इस तरह से करो। So I feel it's a wonderful thing, and I want to thank the European Union, thank the ILO for all that you're doing. And आपने ILO ने बताया कि it is implementation. बाकी और चीज़ें सब फजूल है जब तक हम लोग पाकिस्तानीज़ फेडरल लेवल, प्रोविंशियल लेवल, इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट, लेबराइट, सिविल सोसाइटी हम लोग इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं करेंगे ना तो कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है। और इंशाल्लाह होगा, मुझे तो काफ़ी उम्मीद है। मुझे पता है कि हम लोग जब वज़ीर आज़म के पास जाते हैं और हमारी चेक लिस्ट होती है, ह्यूमन राइट्स के ऊपर ये है, बॉन्डेड लेबर के ऊपर ये करना, लेबर राइट्स के ऊपर क्या क्या करना है, ये सारे एक लिस्ट है। और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह प्रोग्रेस काफ़ी हुआ है। और इंशाअल्लाह जब हम लोग यूरोपियन यूनियन के पास जाएंगे जनवरी में और बताएंगे कि ये हुआ है, हमारे लिए GSP प्लस for us it's very, very important, because one of the things we have to do is create jobs. One of the things we've got to do is get our children, all of them, into schools. It is not acceptable that our children are out of school. It's not a good society if we do this, if we just leave our children to do work. And it's because of economic compulsions. So let's start by creating jobs, and inshallah with the extension of the European Union and all that means that we're trying, I can assure you, categorically assure you, that the government, your government is doing its very best to increase our economic progress and increase our exports, because that is the way we do it. I'd like to conclude. आप लोगों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. Thank you for all that you are doing for us, and inshallah we will again hopefully get the GSP plus, and then we must all work together. All of you, labor unions, civil rights people, the employers, all of us must do much better. You know, in Sialkot, I remember 20 years ago, an accusation of child labor was there. Alhamdulillah, it is removed. We don't have child labor in our sports goods and in our carpets and things. So we have made progress, and we must continue to do so. It is in our interest that through this we build a better society for ourselves. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Mr. Dawood, Advisor to the Prime Minister, Mr. Lal Malhi, Parliamentary Secretary for Human Rights, Mrs. Ingrid Christiansen, Country Director for ILO, Mr. Karamat Ali, Executive Director of Pillar, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I will use all the Urdu I know today. I would like to, first of all, congratulate Pilar on organizing this very useful national consultation to share strategies and to discuss GSP Plus, and to also say that this event is a very, very timely event, since we are currently discussing the next report that will go to the European Parliament on the implementation of GSP Plus. Let me start by a clarification. The European Union grants these generous trade preferences because we believe in sustainable and inclusive development, based on universal values enshrined in the 27 core conventions covering provisions of human rights, labor rights, in respect for the environment, and in the context of good governance. Simply put, growth without respecting workers' rights, without civil society space, and without effort to promote gender equality, it's simply not sustainable. So it's not us coming to impose things on Pakistan, but we're using the experience that we've seen throughout the world. Unless you comply with these conventions, you cannot have sustainable growth. And we work with our partners to ensure sustainable growth. Let me also put the GSP Plus in context. We currently have GSP Plus provisions with 8 countries, 7 countries apart from Pakistan. The others are Armenia, Bolivia, Cabo Verde, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. Now, if we look at the percentage that Pakistan has of imports into the EU, 2/3 of the imports under GSP Plus are from Pakistan. So we can say Pakistan is a very, very good performer on GSP Plus. However, if we look at the potential of Pakistan to use GSP Plus into the EU, I think we will see that there is a great potential for further improvement. More specifically, I know some numbers were mentioned, but I think it's important to highlight those numbers. The overall trade volume increased from 8.3 billion euros in 2013, so before GSP Plus was introduced. We had a trade volume of 8.3 billion, and it's now 12.5 billion. So that's an increase of about 50%. If we look at how much inputs into the EU have grown from Pakistan, then inputs or exports of Pakistan to the EU increased by 51.5%. The other side, imports from EU into Pakistan increased by 47%. So Pakistan is doing better than, say, the EU in that reciprocity relationship. If we look at what types of products and which are the sectors that are benefiting more, 70%, over 70% is in textiles. This is, of course, very, very good for the textiles sector. However, other sectors have a huge potential which needs to be tapped in. If we look into the textile sector and see what types of things are being exported, it's predominantly fabric. So potentially, even in the textile sector, you could have much more added value types of products being exported into the EU, which would give much more profit to those companies. Let me also say that compliance with the conventions would generate better economic opportunities and vice versa. It is, in my opinion, a true win-win proposition. Compliance will also make Pakistan more attractive for foreign direct investment and for joint ventures. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go into monitoring and the implementation of GSP Plus, I want to highlight that the implementation of all rights are important. So addressing violence against women and children, ill treatment by law enforcement agencies, honor killings, corporal punishment, child labor, and discrimination against women at the workplace, shrinking space for media and freedom of expression are all very, very important. However, given the the focus of today's meeting, I will focus predominantly on those that concern labor rights. Labor rights in Pakistan with regard to collective bargaining, wage discrimination, bonded labor, child labor, gender discrimination, labor inspection, disregard for freedom of association and collective bargaining, and the situation of labor in agriculture, mines and brick kilns remains a matter of great concern to us, and also Ingrid raised quite in detail some of those issues. The figures are staggering. 3 million people living in modern slavery or bonded labor. More than 2 million children under the age of 14 are still engaged in work, and unionization rate remains very low at under 5%. And on top of that, we are aware that union workers are exposed to threats of violence and sometimes kidnapping. I will not repeat, and I've already taken a page out of my notes, what Ingrid said, but in a nutshell, with respect to labor rights, we have 4 categories of concern, and let me outline them. It was mentioned that there was not a child labor survey for many, many decades. We're aware that you're actually conducting this survey now. I think we're very interested in seeing the results of those being made public very, very soon. On the labor inspection system, again, we are very much aware that, because you were talking about capacity, sir, that improvements have been made, numbers of inspectors have increased, also women inspectors have been introduced. Those are all very, very positive. However, we have to say that there's still not enough inspectors, and further effort has to be made. Third, concern is to align labor legislation with the ILO Conventions 87 and 98 on freedom of association and collective bargaining, and also to ensure that those apply also to export processing zone and special economic zones. And fourth, stronger focus on gender gap and the discrimination against women in the labor market. With respect to women issues, let me tell you that currently we are in the EU, we are in the process of having a new European Union Commission. For the first time, we will have a woman president. For the first time, we will have equal numbers of commissioners, women and men. And this is something which is at the core of what the next 5 years for the EU will be focusing on. So in everything we do, the issues of gender we also take extremely seriously. Just to clarify the process, a few words on how we monitor GSP Plus. According to the regulation, we have to submit a report to the European Parliament and the Council on the functioning of the GSP Plus, and that we have to do every 2 years. We are currently drafting the 3rd such 2-year plan. And the report details the progress and effective implementation of the relevant conventions, and also is based on input that the country itself provides to us. So it's not just what we know. We pose, let's say, questions to the countries we work with, and we incorporate in that report what the countries themselves report and are able to, let's say, prove that there is a certain trends. Now, if we look at the first report in 2016, this was considered to be, let's say the rating was considered to be a balanced view on human rights, labor rights, as well as environment and governance. Why that was made? Because at that stage, the first report basically looked at the adoption of a series of legislations. And we had just started to work on GSP Plus, and a number of new legislation was put in place. The second report was classified as balanced because it reflected institutional developments like the establishment of the treaty implementation cells, the National Commission for Human Rights, and the one on the status of women. Provisional government's involvement in also in implementing the 27 conventions. It highlighted the need for new legislation as well as the effective implementation of the National Action Plan for the Provision of Human Rights. So I have already mentioned what are the concerns that we have in view of the third report that is currently being drafted. Statistics was also mentioned, and data. In order to know that any policy that is being implemented is going in the right direction, you have to have data of where you were when you started, be able to track how that is evolving, and be able to report back. So I think, and this is not just a Pakistani problem, but I think globally data, there's not enough data to be able to support policy decisions. And also Pakistan needs to improve, and we are working with ILO in trying to help Pakistan be able to deliver on those provisions. So the coordination that needs to take place for the implementation of these conventions is not, of course, just at the federal level, us talking to the federal level. Because of the structure, because of the constitution of Pakistan, it's very, very much important to discuss at provisional level too. And of course, having the treaty implementation cells is very, very important. But other actors are also very, very important as well. Civil society is very important. Civil society has a role in actually ensuring that implementation of the conventions happens and happens correctly. And civil society is also very important in order to be able to raise awareness on what needs to take place. There was a question by Mr. Karamat on what is the EU doing and how the EU could further help Pakistan in complying with GSP+. Well, let me tell you that we already have a series of programs with the Ministry of Human Rights, particularly issues concerning gender aspects, but not only. We're working with ILO and other partners or implementing programs that are GSP plus linked. And sometimes I have noticed that some of the projects we are financing, seen from Pakistan, they're only seen as who is doing the implementation of those programs, but not where the financing comes from. And that's something we in the EU have to work on. There was also a question about the review period. Let me tell you that the formal review period is what I've just mentioned, and it's linked to our regulation. Last week we were in Brussels, both Pakistani side and myself, and also colleagues from headquarters, and we were there discussing the Joint Commission. The Joint Commission is an annual meeting between EU and Pakistan, where we look at what are we doing on development cooperation, what are we doing on human rights, what are we doing on trade, and we take stock. Part of the things that were discussed was also GSP+, and one of the things that was mentioned is that we need to find a more frequent time limit within which to take stock of where we are and are we going in the right direction. So potentially there will be a change in that respect. So with respect to where we are now, as was mentioned before, I think one of our biggest concerns is the pace, the speed with which implementation is taking place. Of course, we're interested in the trend. It's not like you can go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour very, very quickly, but you should be accelerating. So please ensure that there's no backtracking, because that will be really problematic, but also that each year things are accelerating. So there was also mentioned that the role of businesses and how many people are employed in the textile sector, I think you were mentioning. Let me tell you that the business associations themselves have a big role to play. And I will use an example that I personally lived in a previous capacity that I had, and that concerns what happened in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, there was the Rama Plaza accident. There was a clothes factory in 2013, which collapsed and killed about 1,100 people. At that time, outside every shop in Brussels that sold anything from Bangladesh, anything, not just from that particular factory, there were people demonstrating. People demonstrating and saying, we do not want anything more from Bangladesh. So the industry has a big role to play in self-regulating. It cannot be that I take care of my factory and I close my eyes to whatever happens next door. If something goes wrong, it affects all of you. So that is also very important. So in conclusion, let me just say that the EU is a partner with Pakistan for many, many decades. We're here to continue to be a partner. We're here and available and doing taking actions and promoting programs to implement GSP+, but to help Pakistan implement it. And finally, thank you to Pilar for organizing this event. Thank you. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया.
Thank you very much, Madam Andula Kaminara. EU ऑफिस की खास अहमियत है इसमें GSP प्लस को एडवांस करने में, उसकी मॉनिटरिंग और इम्प्लीमेंटेशन को आगे बढ़ाने में. मैडम एंड्रूला.
Honorable speakers at the dais, distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. Ideally, I would speak in Uru, but I can't do that. I can sort of understand it, but I cannot speak. So I will have to use English. I will spare you from the Danish, but that's the reason why I have such strange accent. First of all, I would like to say thanks to Pilar for organizing this multi-stakeholder consultation on strategies and partnerships for improved coordination and compliance of the GSP Plus treaties. And I would also like to say thanks to you for inviting the ILO to come and join and also speak here at this occasion. As was already said, the GSP Plus status was granted to Pakistan back in 2014, and it is continuously being, it's continued and based on also biannual reviews and monitoring of the compliance and reporting on these identified 27 UN conventions. And as you were saying, you had seven in your domain. Under the labor, you have the eight core fundamental principles and rights at work. These 8 conventions that concerns freedom of association, collective bargaining, and right to organize. The 2, and then there are 2 more on forced labor. Then there are 2 more on child labor, and then there are finally 2 more on equality and non-discrimination. So these 8 conventions are part of the GSP+. What we see from our perspective that the GSP Plus is leveraging the respect for the fundamental principles and rights at work. And there are indeed positive developments. Madam just mentioned all the laws that have been enacted, but there are also some reasons for concern, but let me come back to that. We also think seriously that there are much more awareness that perhaps there were some years ago about these matters, yet there are still work to be done. But overall, we see progress, but it's also a bit patchy. There are good developments, but around it maybe not so good. And it's not at the pace that we would expect. I've even heard some say snail's pace, but there are concerns also in that. And these include, among others, when we talk about, for instance, freedom of association, the very low union density. We are talking about a few percentage that are unionized. We also see a low female labor force participation rate compared to other countries in the region, and in Asia Pacific, Pakistan is definitely in the lower part. And from time to time reports on discriminative practices. And when I drive home from the office to my where I live, I can meet street children on the streets selling flowers, selling books, and they are not above 14 or even 12. So it's quite obvious. So from our perspective, we think that it is great also to see that there is more export, etc. But all this increased trade needs to better translate into actual social development through outcomes such as, of course, increase in decent employment, but also outcomes on more respect and application, effective application of the fundamental principles and rights at work. Within the ILO, or as a sort of attached to the ILO, there is the Committee of Experts of the Application of Conventions and Recommendations, and there's also the Committee of Freedom of Associations. These are the two supervisory bodies, and they are reviewing and assessing the progress made by all the member countries, 187 at this point in time, and these assessments are based on the reporting of the countries on international labor standards, and they have indeed noticed some positive developments also. For instance, that they are noting that in some of the laws that have come across more recently on child labor, there is indeed a list of hazardous work which children below 18 should not or must not be doing. But the committees also repeatedly highlight existing gaps, both in the legislative framework, but also in the application, the implementation, and the enforcement of these, as you can say, the national laws that implement these principles enshrined in the conventions. And this is not least when it comes to application of the conventions concerning freedom of association and collective bargaining. For instance, just as a few examples, they are concerned about the scope of application. They are, the definition of workmen, etc., are too narrow. There are groups of workers that are workers, for instance, in the public sector. You have as a managers level, as a mid-level managers. There are many that are de facto or according to the law outside that. There's also concerns about the right to freely establish and join unions of own choice. There's a whole issue of the informal economy. How do trade unions actually and the collective bargaining, how does that work when we do not have conventional employers and workers? And there is the issue of registration of trade unions, where there are possibly too much administration around it, but also the interference by government, for instance, in financial supervision. And in terms of this, I just want to mention that the ILO, with the support of the European Union, we are currently undertaking 2 studies, and some of you have been also speaking with the researchers and maybe also in the future, and one concerns the impediments to effective freedom of association and collective bargaining in the country, and another one concerns the labor dispute resolution mechanism and scope for improving of such. So that's one area where there is still need to look at the things. There's also need to look at, for instance, in terms of gender, where the committee recommend and state there should be provisions expressly defining and prohibiting direct and indirect discrimination in all aspects of employment and occupation for all workers on all grounds set out in the different articles. And they have been looking at some of the laws and do not think that they are fully in compliance with that. But as I said, there's the positive development, and they note, among other things, and these with the hazardous work for children. So that's a good step that we also should note. And in this context, I just want to mention that in terms of child labor, the country is now undertaking a huge effort, congratulations to all, to do a national child labor survey. The last survey, national survey, was done in 1996, and now it's being repeated with the support of UNICEF and DFID, and when we come to the analysis part, we would also go in and help out there. A key, you can say, a key basis for also monitoring and the application of the freedom of association and the fundamental principles and rights at work, that is if we don't do that regularly, we don't know where we are. And that's where the labor force survey can help us on a regular basis to sort of take stock of the situation. And right now we are in discussions also with the support of the EU, with the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics and the provincial wings of those, for the possibilities of improving the measurements of the fundamental principles and rights at work, improving on the questions so that there are some more information coming available regularly. Another positive development is, of course, the enactment of the many laws. Having said that, and this is laws primarily at the provincial level, which is due to also the development of the subject. But we also hear frequently, and I think from many of us, that there is a need to simplify them, consolidate, and not least ensure alignment with international labor standards. They are not all in conformity, as I said above. One thing is the laws, one thing is the rules, but that doesn't take away the maybe even larger step, that is to implement those. You can have the most beautiful laws, of the most correctly worded laws in the world, but if they are not implemented, if they are not applied at the individual, for instance, workplaces, or when, as you come at the provincial level, etc., at the national level, it's not really worth it. And it also, for them all go, enforcement isn't needed. Enforcement both through, you can say, labor inspection, but also, of course, the courts, the judicial system. And I'm happy to note that we were almost getting the coffee wrong in the throat when we saw that some province in Pakistan had abolished labor inspection. We didn't think this was the right way to go, but we are happy to note that the government has also clarified that it wasn't the intention. So thanks for that. And for that, and you were mentioning that, Mr. Karamat, also the capacity. The capacity, we cannot expect that these things will be implemented by themselves. We need to build capacity at all levels and at all ways, and a coordination, of course, is very important. And that's here where I'm also very happy to hear when we came in, I think this is one of the good news, and we still maybe need to see it flesh out, but that the trade unions have come together and are talking about making an intention of coming on one platform, and so that's a very good step in the right direction. So finally, I think I should also mention the concerns we had about Balochistan, where we also still see that there is still work to be done there when we saw the High Court decision to abolish a number of trade unions, that de facto abolished a number of trade unions out there. Finally, an announcement. You know, it's the ILO's 100 years of anniversary, and I just was seeing on the website that, and we also know that now it's up, but on the 28th of April, the Committee of Experts on the Application of Conventions and Recommendations, they will hold a workshop in Geneva, centenary event, and that's about compliance, monitoring compliance with international labor standards, and it's being broadcasted on the web. So if any are interested, then turn on your smartphone or your computer and listen to that. So with this, I would like to say many thanks for inviting us, and we look forward to also hearing more about the day here and what comes out of that. But it's certainly a good topic to discuss.
Ambassador to Pakistan, Madam Andrula Kaminara, मैं मैडम इंग्रिड क्रिस्टियनसन को दावत दूंगी कि वो यहाँ आकर अपने रिमार्क्स शेयर करें। उनकी स्पेशलिटी ऑक्यूपेशनल सेफ्टी एंड हेल्थ के हवाले से रही है, अपार्ट फ्रॉम अदर पोजीशन जिसमें उन्होंने ILO में, एशिया में, अफ्रीका। मैडम क्रिस्टियनसन पिछले 3 साल से पाकिस्तान में ILO की कंट्री डायरेक्टर के तौर पर काम कर रही हैं।
The concerned treaty bodies through Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Besides, Universal Periodic Review Report has also been assigned to MOHR. In some cases, follow-up reports are also required from the committee. After presentation of obligatory reports, above concerned committees concluding observations, recommendations on each reports are forwarded to the government for consideration. In this regard, concluding observations, recommendations received from concerned committees are shared with relevant departments of the federal and provincial governments for consideration of requisite legislative, policy and administrative measures, which is a continuous process. Keeping in view the 18th Amendment scenario, treaty implementation cells have been established at federal, provincial, AJK and GB level on the initiative of MOHR. Federal TIC is with the Ministry of Commerce, and Attorney General Pakistan is the convener of the cell. The Secretary MOHR is also member of TIC. Honorable members and guests, I would like to quote some things here. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, as it assumed power last year or a year ago, the situation was not good for trade, for human rights, and for common people in the country. We had a debt deficit, we had a big debt, trade deficit, and we are suffering from various issues, from corruption to bad governance. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is committed not to interfere in the different departments like police, like employment should be on merit, recruitment, development projects, etc. This government not only shares and accepts, but it's our constitution, Article 25, which guarantees equality among all citizens without any discrimination of caste, creed, or gender. So this government will continue to strive, and you see minorities are being given special status during this government. The Kartarpur project, the Kartarpur corridor, which has been opened up now, it not only facilitates Sikh community in Pakistan, but also the Sikh minority in India. Now they can easily come and perform their rituals and pilgrimage. So this government is committed to human rights and the upliftment of human rights, and will continue to strive for that. Thank you very much.
I will now call on stage Madam Ingrid Christensen, Country Director of ILO.
तो पहली बार ग्लोबल सतह पर एक मैनिफेस्टो है ये और यूरोपियन यूनियन ने लगाया, तो इनमें सबसे जो एडवांस क्लॉज नहीं डाला जाना चाहिए, सोशल क्लॉज नहीं डाला गया। उसके बाद ऑप्शन निकाला कि सोशल क्लॉज नहीं होना चाहिए। हम सब कमिट करते हैं कि हम ILO के कन्वेंशन की तरफ से था कि सोशल क्लॉज होना चाहिए। 92 में हमारे खिते के डेवलपिंग और नॉन अलाइंड मुल्कों ने वर्कर्स के तंत्रों की तरफ से एक सोशल क्लॉज होना चाहिए ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट के अंदर, और WTO का बुलाता था। एक IMS बना था जिसके साथ अभी हमने एक नया मुआहदा किया है, और तीसरा बना देखना था खास तौर पे मईशत के दायरे में। तो एक वर्ल्ड बैंक कायम हुआ, वो उस वक्त इंटरनेशनल बैंक पर आपको प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रीटमेंट दिया जा सकता है, वो नहीं दिया जाएगा। तो पाकिस्तान भी उन पाबंदियों, आप अपने यहाँ ये करो नहीं तो आपकी ट्रेड पर पाबंदी लग जाएगी, और जिसमें बहुत तो ये यूरोपियन यूनियन ने उससे पहले जो मैकेनिज्म आ रहे थे, जो ट्रेड ने अपने डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स बनाया, उसके बाद कोविनेंट्स बनाए, लेकिन कोई मैकेनिज्म नहीं हो कि लोगों को जिसमें वर्कर भी हैं, एम्प्लॉयर भी है, ओवरऑल इकोनॉमी है, उसको फायदा हो रहा है। पोस्ट सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर पीरियड में कि जिसको कम अज कम मैं ज़ाती तौर पे उसको सबसे अहम इनिशिएटिव समझता हूँ। जो जो है पोजिशन हमारी होती हैं, तो ये GSP प्लस जो है तरतीब दे सकेंगे, और फिर उसको फॉलो करने के बारे में भी कोई हमारी स्ट्रेटेजी हो। उम्मीद है कि जैसे इंडिया ने बताया कि इस मीटिंग के आखिर में हम एक बामानी हैं, और यहाँ जो मेरे दोस्त ट्रेड यूनियन के पूरे मुल्क से आए हैं, एफ्टमा के नुमाइंदे इस कमेटी को हेड करते हैं, और ह्यूमन राइट्स ILO की कंट्री डायरेक्टर, और हमारे मुंतखब नुमाइंदे जनाब लाल, थैंक यू वेरी मच। तो जनाब Razak Dawood Sahab, Honorable Minister for Commerce. I would like to speak in Urdu because most people here are not familiar. Representative of Ambassador of the EU, so she has learned this much already. Although she's been here for a very brief